You came into this world pure, curious, absorbent, malleable, cosmic, before the world told you what to want, before somebody else's appetite got near you, before shame had a name, before you had performance, before you learned hiding, before you learned violence, before you learned lust, before you learned how to numb yourself, before you learned how to disappear inside your own body. There was a version of you that looked at the world without suspicion. There was a version of you that reached for things, that laughed without checking the room first, that trusted without calculating, that felt wonder before it felt threat. Some of us barely remember him. Some of us don't remember him at all. Some of us were introduced to corruption before we were even old enough to understand what corruption was. Some of us were exposed to things before we had language, before we had defense, before we had choice, before we had any ability to look at what was happening and say, no, this is not for me. This should not be here. I am not ready for this. And when that happens early enough, it doesn't feel like an event. It feels like reality. It feels like the world. It feels like you. And that's the danger. Because a man can go his whole life mistaking what happened to him for who he is. He can go his whole life confusing exposure with desire, confusing damage with identity, confusing appetite with freedom, impulse with truth. And brother, I understand that more than I wish I did. I understand what it is like to have things planted early. I understand what it is to be shaped by something you did not ask for. I understand what it is to carry an appetite so long that you almost stop questioning whether it belongs to you. I understand what it is to look at your own patterns and think, damn, has this really been running me that long? 40 years, 20 years, 10 years, half a lifetime, a whole lifetime, whatever the number is, it gets heavy when you finally see it clearly. And that is where a lot of men lose the plot, because once they find the explanation, they try to turn it into permission. They say, well, this happened to me. I was raised this way. Nobody taught me. I was exposed too early. I was hurt. I was abandoned. I was corrupted. I was just surviving. And maybe every word of that is true. Maybe the record supports it. Maybe the explanation is real. The wound is real. Maybe the pattern makes perfect sense when you trace it back honestly. But explanation isn't exoneration. Understanding is not permission. And pain doesn't make you innocent forever. At some point, a man has to stop worshiping the thing that wounded him. At some point, a man has to stop calling his captivity just who I am. At some point, a man has to look at the pattern and say, I did not choose how this started, but I am responsible for whether it continues. That is the dividing line. That is where formation becomes governance. And that is where Reforged begins. Because I am not interested in pretending men are monsters from birth. I'm not interested in pretending every broken man woke up one day and chose corruption from a clean room. That is lazy. That is dishonest. It's too easy. Men are formed. Men are trained. Men are rewarded, ignored, exposed, abandoned, humiliated, and seduced by appetite. Men are taught to hide, taught to perform strength while rotting beneath it. And then the world acts shocked when the bill comes due. No, I'm not shocked. I see it. I understand it. When I look at men destroying themselves, destroying families, destroying relationships, their bodies, their freedom, destroying their futures, I don't look at them like I'm above them. Brother, I get it. I fucking get it. I know how a man gets there. I know how drift works. I know how appetite works, how shame works. I know how secrecy works. I know how resentment becomes fuel. I know how pornography, ego, alcohol, drugs, violence, attention, chaos, comfort, and self-pity can all become like little gods. I know how a man can kneel to something every day and still call himself free. I know. But here's the part I won't soften. It's pathetic to keep letting the thing that damaged you govern your life, because you are not pathetic. There is more in you than that. Because there is still something alive under the wreckage. There is still a standard available to you. The excuse may explain the wound, but it does not justify the surrender. And that's what I'm attacking right here, not the wounded child. not the confused boy, not the man who finally admits something happened to me and I have been carrying it wrong. I'm not attacking him. I'm calling him out of the grave. I'm attacking the surrender, ritual, the obedience, the private agreement you keep making with the thing that owns you. That is what has to die. Because if you don't kill it, you will feed it. And if you feed it long enough, you will become fluent in your own destruction. You will build a whole personality around avoiding correction. You will call it honesty when it is really indulgence. You'll call it freedom when it's really compulsion. And you'll call it trauma when it's really refusal. You'll call it coping when it's obedience. You call it how I am because saying how I am choosing to live would make you responsible. And responsibility is the thing most men spend their whole lives trying to dodge. But you cannot rebuild without it. You cannot be reforged without it. You cannot be corrected without evidence. You cannot heal what you keep defending. You cannot govern what you refuse to name. And you cannot become new while still protecting every old appetite that helped ruin you. So no, this is not motivational content. This is not me telling you to believe in yourself and drink more water. This isn't self-help with a deeper voice. This is a demand. Look at the record. Look at the pattern. Look at what you obey. And look at what it cost you. Look at who else paid for it. Look at the women who had to survive your chaos. Look at the children who had to read your moods. Look at the friends who stopped trusting your word. Look at the family members who learned to expect disappointment, the jobs you lost, the rooms you poisoned, the opportunities you fumbled, the body you neglected. Look at the years you burned. Look at the man you kept promising to become. Where's he? And ask yourself one clean question. What evidence says I'm changing? Not what story, not what explanation or intention or excuse, not what emotional breakthrough, evidence. What changed? What did you stop doing? What did you start doing? What did you repair? What did you confess? What did you confront? What did you remove? What did you build? What did you repeat when nobody praised you for it? What did you do when appetite came back? What did you do when the old pattern knocked? What did you do when nobody was watching? Because that's where the truth is. The truth is not in your speech. The truth is in your repetition. A man is not what he claims during a high moment. A man is what he repeats under pressure. And that is why I say ignore the anecdotes. Not because stories don't matter. Stories matter. Origin matters. Pain matters. Formation matters. But if your story never produces correction, then your story has just become another hiding place. And some men are addicted to being understood because being understood feels close enough to being changed, but it is not. Being understood is not the same as being governed. Being seen is not the same as being corrected. Being wounded is not the same as being exempt. And being able to explain the pattern is not the same as breaking it. So yes, I want emotional appeal. Of course I do. Because this is not a gimmick. This is the entire point. I'm not speaking to men like machines. I'm speaking to men who were once boys, who were curious, boys who were open, that were watching, who absorbed the room, boys who learned too early what adults were too careless, too selfish, too broken, or too absent to protect them from. And I am saying I see that. I honor that. I will not mock that wound. I will not pretend it didn't matter, but I will also not help you build a throne for it. You do not get to make your damage king. You do not get to make your appetite the law. You do not get to make your wound your final identity. You do not get to keep handing the steering wheel to something that never loved you, never protected you, never built you, and never had to pay the consequences for what it made you become. You are responsible now. And that may sound harsh. Good. Because responsibility is harsh when you have spent years trying to survive without it. But it is also mercy. Because if you are responsible now, then you are not helpless now. If you are responsible now, then you can move now. You can correct Now. If you're responsible now, then the past may explain you, but it does not own you, brother. And that is the difference. That's the whole fight. You weren't born bent. You were formed. You were exposed. You were shaped. You were trained. You were damaged. You were rewarded for some things and punished for others. You adapted. You survived. You learned. You hid. You performed. You obeyed. But now you see it. And once you see it, you are accountable for what you do next. So what are we going to do about it? Not someday. Not when life gets easier. Not when the right person loves you correctly. Not when the apology comes. Not when the system fixes itself. Not when your father explains himself. Not when your mother finally understands. Not when your record disappears or your body feels perfect. Not when your confidence shows up. Not when your mind is quiet. Now. What are we going to do about it now? Because there is still a man under there. There is still a builder under there. There is still a father under there. There is still a protector under there. There is still a disciplined creature under there. There is a mind capable of precision, a body capable of labor, a soul capable of correction. There is still a future that does not have to be governed by the first things that damaged you. But you have to stop negotiating with the old gods. You have to stop romanticizing the appetite. You have to stop calling collapse authenticity. Stop calling confession with change. You have to stop expecting sympathy to do the work of discipline. You have to stop waiting to feel innocent before you act responsible. You may never feel innocent. I get that. Some of us do not have clean memories to return to. Some of us do not get to say, I remember before. Some of us have to build forward without ever being able to fully recover what was taken, and that is real. But innocence is not the requirement. Responsibility is. Correction is. Evidence, discipline, ownership, movement. You do not need a perfect origin to build a governed life. You don't need a clean childhood to become a clean actor now. You don't need to be untouched to become trustworthy. You don't need to be innocent to become honorable. You need to stop lying. You need to stop hiding. You need to stop obeying the thing that keeps shrinking you. And then you need to build one corrected action, one governed appetite, one honest admission, one repaired relationship, one disciplined repetition, one clean decision, one refusal, one apology, one workout, one meal, one journal entry, one boundary, one day, one more day, one more day. That is how a man comes back. Not all at once, not through performance, not through a speech, not through a fantasy version of himself, through evidence, through repetition, pressure, correction, through choosing again and again not to be governed by what damaged him. That is reforged. Not perfection, not purity theater, not pretending the past didn't happen, or pretending appetite disappears because you gave one emotional speech. Reforged is what happens when a man looks at the whole record and stops flinching. When he says, this formed me, this bent me, this trained me, this cost me, this hurt other people, this is mine to correct now. And then he moves. No applause required. No rescue fantasy required. No institution, title, credential. None of that required. Just evidence, just correction. That's all. Just the hard, repeated proof that the thing that damaged you does not get to govern you anymore. Brother, I understand. I really do. But now that we understand it, what are we going to do about it?